Welcome to DM the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. My most recent video that I put out was my review and overview of Ravenloft, The Horrors Within, and I did touch upon the main premise of this video in that video slightly, but in this video I wanted to cover it more. The whole idea of, is it worth getting that book if you are running and DMing Curse of Strahd? Strahd is on the cover, after all, of both versions of the book. To quickly explain, for those who don't know, The Horrors Within is the wider Ravenloft setting book and source book, sort of like the 5.5e expansion or replacement of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which came out in 2021. And not only covers a bit about Strahd and Barovia, but other domains of Strahd as well. The Horrors Within does have general info for Barovia as well as Strahd. The idea being that if someone wants to run Strahd and Barovia, but they don't have access to Curse of Strahd, then they can. But how much of it is new and how much of it is repetition from Curse of Strahd? And how much of the book outside of the Strahd and Barovia section is useful as well? So let's kind of break it down by section, and the first thing I'm going to talk about are the stat blocks. We've got a new Strahd stat block, essentially the 5.5e version of Strahd. I'm going to do a dedicated upcoming video where I kind of analyse the stat block, and I've seen some initial online chatter about it, what's good about it, what's not so good about it, and I'll do a deep dive then. There's also new stat blocks for Van Richten, Esmeralda, and Madame Eva. And I've seen some people say in the initial chatter I've seen so far that they prefer the new version of Van Richten, which is interesting because I've also seen people say they don't. And I understand that some of them are fairly different. So then probably the next video I'm going to do, the next video will be the Strahd one, but the next video I'll do will probably look at Es, VR, Eva, and kind of compare the 2014 versions to the new ones. A while back, I did a video about monsters you could add from Heir of Strahd, the Ravenloft novel that came out last year, that you could put into Curse of Strahd. These were monsters from Van Richten's Guide that don't appear in Curse of Strahd, so you'd have to homebrew and add them in. The two main ones were Boneless and Grimishkas, and we've got new versions of those. There's a new updated Were-Raven stat block that are in Raw Curse of Strahd, and there's a brand new monster, Strahd Skeleton, challenge rating 4. The flavor text says they're known as Strahd skeletons in recognition of the Lord of Barovia who first created them. I like how it plays up Strahd's necromancy abilities as well. Again, not going to talk about it in this video, sorry, I'm saying that a lot, I'm conscious of that. I am going to do a video soon where I talk about all of the brand new monsters in the book that weren't sort of updated versions from Van Richten's Guide and talk about them in a video. Moving off stat blocks now, there's a new map design for Barovia. I'll put both on the screen next to me so you can kind of compare. They are identical in terms of what's included and the size and the layout. Just the color scheme is different and the sort of art side of it is different. And speaking of art, we've got some new art in this chapter of different places in Barovia, some of which we haven't had before. There's art of like the approach to Vallaki and the skulls on the pikes. Nice sort of tie into the Wolf's Head Jamboree festival that happens before the PCs arrive. The art might be from the perspective of the west gate, not the east, which is likely what they'll come across first from the direction they come from, because of the church, but I might be overthinking it. There's also cool new art of the castle and village Barovia. I've said this in a recent video, I think the perspective is wrong. The village Barovia should be sort of southeast of the castle, not north of it, but still, it looks really cool. And there's art of the outside of the Blood of the Vine Tavern in the village of Barovia as well. There's a Strahd domain section. I talked about this in my review video, but talked about Fulkovnia and that version, a different domain of Dread. But in the Strahd's version, it's kind of like domain effects, and it talks about closing the borders. This is nothing new. This is in Curse of Strahd. But there's two new ones. Dreadful Darkness. If you're in an area of darkness, creatures other than Strahd and creatures of your choice have disadvantage on saving throws to end or avoid frightened condition. Nice. And Jealous Heart, when a creature receives inspiration but already has it, they can't give it to another character in the group. So they could be two things you can consider adding that are sort of raw, rules as written now, even if they weren't in the original Curse of Strahd. There's information about von Zarovich sanctuaries. It says they are hidden from the sun, so it kind of suggests that the Horrors Within version of Barovia doesn't have the whole thing about sunlight not actually being sunlight. Not sure if that's an oversight, maybe, that the people who designed this missed that detail in Curse of Strahd about how vampires can go out in the daytime because it's like this super vision of overcast and they won't get sunburnt, for lack of a better word, or destroyed by the sun would be more accurate. But even so, I've seen quite a few people say that they do this anyways, like a homebrew edition, because they think Strahd would have more than just his coffin in Barovia. He has backup coffins dotted around the whole of Barovia. I think in one of the old Ravenloft novels, that was the case. And it's a good idea to do if you consider making the map of Barovia bigger. This is something I advise against. I did a whole video about that. So if you want to learn more about that, watch that video. There's information about Tatyana reincarnations. This is similar to what was in Van Richten's guide. It's not really handy for Curse of Strahd DMs in my opinion, as we already have our Irina. But it could be good if you want to mix things up for maybe second-time players of Curse of Strahd, or people who tried Curse of Strahd and didn't finish it. Maybe it fizzled out or what have you. And so they know about Irina, so it'd be an interesting spin to make it someone who isn't Irina and use one of the options listed in this book. There's more adventure ideas. One of them is called Blood of the Vine. It's got a little small written adventure, and there's a map of the tavern as well for level 6 PCs. And what I like about the map is it's done by Mike Schley. Now, he did the maps in the original Curse of Strahd, so it matches in style. I'll do a comparison next to me where you will see part of the brand new Blood of the Vine map next to the Blue Water Inn map from Vallaki from original Curse of Strahd, and you'll see that it's very similar in style and design. I think that's great that you can kind of, if you're using the maps from the book, and you want to include a map of the tavern in the village of Barovia, you can do that and it not be like a completely different design or from a completely different map maker. I'll quickly summarize the adventure. I won't go through it word for word. Erwin from the Blue Water Inn asks the players to investigate why the Blood of the Vine is closed. And money bags. Erwin has 500 gold. He's going to offer to each player to do this thing for him. Wow, why has he been squirreling that away? I thought Strahd had all the money, not the Martikovs. This could be a cool thing to do. Obviously, it's not intended to add to Curse of Strahd, and it's supposed to be like a standalone separate adventure for people who don't play Curse of Strahd. They play just a wider Ravenloft campaign or just do it as a random Barovian one-shot. But you could potentially add this in if you want them to do a cool sort of return to the village of Barovia thing. I do know those DMs who sort of advise against backtracking, but on the other hand, I think it's a shame that people only experience the village of Barovia once, pass through it, leave, and never go back there again. In my campaign, something happened that caused something to happen in the village of Barovia after they'd already been there, so they went back to it, and it didn't feel that bad to backtrack to it. So this could be a really cool idea for if you want to know just a random adventure to draw them back in that direction. And the 3 owners of the Blood of the Vine Tavern have been corrupted and turned into different monsters. And the stat blocks are, I think one's from the 2024 Monster Manual, but the other 2 are from this new book. And in addition to the main map, there's also a map of beneath the tavern and outside the village where there's like a tunnel leading from the tavern to a hidden exit out of a tree, probably in the nearby tree line. And Treacherous Blood is the other adventure. It looks really cool. It's for level 9 players. And the quest is given by Ernst. That's Lady Vokta's servant in Vallaki. We have another map of the von Zarovich sanctuary. Even if you're not running this adventure, this could be handy for if you do give Strahd like another place that he has a hidden coffin, for example, as I talked about earlier. And this is about Lissa von Zarovich, who's a distant relative of Strahd. She's a vampire nightbringer, which I believe is one of the new stat blocks from the 2024 Monster Manual. And it's set in Berez. Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of like Berez churchyard, and maybe there's an old crypt there where she's hiding out. And there's a tie in there to vampiric mind flayers. I've got a vague memory. I don't know the lore around Lissa very well, but I think there was some ties to Blurtspur, which is the domain of sort of mind flayers, which has got less information in this new book. It had more information in the old Ravenloft book, but there's mentions of vampire mind flayers. It's cool that the designers have sort of got that tie-in still in place, tying into the old lore. And if you need art of Lissa, there's art for her in the old Ravenloft book, not this new one, although it's supposed to be in the context of her being an Irina reincarnation, Tatyana reincarnation, so she looks like Irina. So they could be added to Curse of Strahd, maybe. I think the first one, the Blood of the Vine one, has more potential and easier to insert. What do you think? Would you add them? Have you thought of a good way to add them? For instance, I can't see why, unless I missed it, why Ernst would send them to this random crypt in Berez. What's in it for him and Lady Vokta? There's a horror roleplay section in Chapter 3. It's similar but different to Curse of Strahd's Marks of Horror section in the introduction of Curse of Strahd. And it has things like advice for how to describe horror, how to handle pacing, trying to end sessions on cliffhangers and stuff like that. And then the Haunted Bastion options as well, if you're doing Bastions. I did do a video about Bastions, kind of giving a rough overview and then talking about if you could add them to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, and the consensus was maybe add them to a wider Ravenloft campaign that might be a sequel to Curse of Strahd, but I'm not sure if they work super well in Curse of Strahd. But you can see more about that in that video. And there's character options as well. If you're doing 5.5e and someone wants an option, then you may have to get the book unless they get the book themselves and you do the whole D&D Beyond thing where it all ties in, or just reference their version of it. Species formerly known as lineages. So there's the Dampier, Hexblood, Reborn, and now there's a new one in this book called Lupin. Reborn is a cool idea if a PC dies and is brought back from the dead, maybe with like a dark gift. And looping could be an alternative to if a PC gets lycanthropy. So I've always thought the PC lycanthropy rules were a bit iffy in D&D. This could be a good way to do it. And the whole thing about looping as well is that you're like a werewolf, but you're stuck in your werewolf form permanently, so you can't transform into a wolf or back into your humanoid form. So that could be a cool thing if they get bitten by a werewolf in Barovia, they become a lupin and then they're sort of like a stuck werewolf. Plus all the other stuff, the subclasses, backgrounds, feats and dark gifts. If your players are wanting to use some of those and you're running a 5.5e game, then they or you may have to consider getting it. And the appendix section is all about the tarokka cards because of the new deck. Some of it is similar to what's in Curse of Strahd about what the cards mean and how to, if you don't have the tarokka deck, how you can use playing cards instead. And it gives guidance on another type of draw you can do, where the cards refer to things like the past, the future, things that will help the characters, and so on. But it's kind of loose general info. It kind of gives us as a rough sort of guide. There's not anything as in-depth or that has sort of a mechanic to it like the Curse of Strahd one did. And in fact, I'd probably argue that if you were considering doing more draws within Curse of Strahd, I think it's a really cool idea and get more use out of your tarokka deck. It could potentially distract from Madame Eva's draw or make it look less important. It can confuse things. So you might want to just do the one draw Madame Eva and save this for if you're doing non-Curse of Strahd Ravenloft campaigns or one-shots in the future. I think the real strength of a book like this, though, speaking from experience, not with this book, but with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, is it's a good book to read and then think, I really want to run a Ravenloft campaign. Because when I ran Curse of Strahd, it was roughly from about 2020 to 2022. And Van Richten's Guide came out in 2021. And like I imagine a lot of people, I bought it, not so much for all the other stuff, like all the other domains of dread, but I bought it because I thought, hey, I wonder if this will help me with Curse of Strahd. And hey, it's got more and new monsters in it. And then discovering the book and reading about the different domains of dread, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to run a Ravenloft campaign next, you know? So if you have similar aspirations and you're thinking of what do we do after Curse of Strahd next, it might be worth getting the book just to kind of learn about what the other domains are like and get some hook and seed ideas for potentially doing something like that. Speaking from experience, I can highly recommend that. And I'm going to be cheeky and plug something I made, which I might do a updated version of this now that we've got the Horrors Within and there's new domains like Innsmouth and Sithicus. But in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft days, I tied all the tarokka cards to different domains of dread they could go to. So if you are considering a post-Curse of Strahd wider Ravenloft campaign, it doesn't actually need to be post-Curse of Strahd. If you're just considering a Ravenloft domain hopping campaign, you might want to check it out. It's called the Second Tarokka Reading. So that's everything that I've gleaned from the Horrors Within that I thought could be useful for Curse of Strahd. Did I miss anything that could be useful? I did sort of go through the whole book bit by bit, and obviously some places I spent more time on than others, such as the Barovia Strahd chapter, obviously, but it could be that I missed something that could be really useful. So if I have, please let me know in the comments. It could be useful for other people. So what's the verdict? Is it worth getting it if you're running Curse of Strahd? Ultimately, it depends. If you are a Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft obsessive and a Strahd obsessive, probably makes sense too. If you want more flavour for Strahd and Barovia, if you want more maps, if you want the 5.5e stat blocks and player options, if you want to run a post-Curse of Strahd domain hopping campaign, yes, I think it makes sense to get it. If none of those apply, I'd probably say no. You probably don't need to worry about getting it. I don't think you're going to miss anything out or have any sort of form of FOMO by not getting this if you're running Curse of Strahd. That's it for this one. So as teased earlier, I think my next two Curse of Strahd videos are going to both be about the Horrors Within. I'll do a sort of comparison of Ez, Van Richten, Madame Eva, and then as a separate video do a deep dive analysis of the new Strahd stat block. And then please don't worry, I'm going to still do more general Curse of Strahd videos. For example, I've teased for the longest time that I want to do a dedicated Babylon Saga video. I'll do that soon, I promise. And more Ravenloft the Horrors Within videos, because not only do I do videos about Curse of Strahd, half my videos are about the wider Ravenloft setting. And I think the Horrors Within dedicated video, which will be my next video, will be looking at all the brand new monsters, such as Strahd Skeleton I talked about earlier, but some others, and just talking about what they're like and how to run them and what I think is cool about them. I also have a Patreon-style membership instead of Patreon. It's YouTube's own sort of membership solution where you can get access to videos early. I sometimes do members-only videos, not Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft specific things, but more sort of behind-the-scenes stuff, or I talk more generally about D&D. can get discounts to my DMs CoS products. I've got 3 so far. 2 came out 2 years ago, 1 more recently. I think it was about, actually that's coming up to about a year, I think. But thanks to this new book, I've got at least ideas for 2 or 3 more. So the cool thing is I'll put these products out in the future, and if you become a member, you can get discounts on all of them, 50% off. And a whole bunch of other perks, I'm sure. I'm thinking of doing higher tiers in the future for if you want help running a campaign, or even one-on-one help as well for DMs who need help running Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft. And we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching.